Wine and blood sugar after 60. The one detail the health headlines skip. You've heard it enough times that it barely registers as a claim anymore. A glass of red wine is basically medicine, good for your heart. And if it's good for your heart, surely it's fine for your blood sugar too, especially for seniors, paying closer attention to that number than they used to. That belief rests on one real study, and it's worth knowing exactly what that study found, because what gets repeated isn't quite what it showed. So here's wine and blood sugar after 60, and the halo story only tells part of it. Some of you are about to find out that famous benefit was never actually yours, decided before you ever poured a glass. And every one of you, benefit or not, is carrying a second thing the halo story skips: what that glass does to you overnight, while nobody's watching. Whether the first one is yours depends on something closer to a coin flip than a health decision. The second applies no matter what, and it gets sharper the longer you've been on certain medications. This isn't a verdict on your evening glass. Knowing which parts of what you've heard are actually yours to count on is the point. We'll take the flattering study first, then the part it leaves out. The study everyone quotes. Here's the trial behind almost every "wine is good for diabetics" headline you've seen. It's usually just called the wine trial, and it earned that shorthand honestly. It was the first randomized controlled trial built specifically to test wine, not alcohol in general, in people who already had type 2 diabetes. Researchers took 224 people living with type 2 diabetes, everyone already managing it well, and everyone either a non-drinker or a very light drinker before the study started. For 2 years, each person had 150 milliliters, about 5 ounces, of something with dinner every single night. One group got mineral water, one got white wine, one got red wine. Everyone followed the same Mediterranean-style eating pattern underneath it. Nobody was told to cut calories to make room for the extra pour, and the people running it kept an unusually tight grip on their group. 94% of participants were still checking in at the 1-year mark, 87% at the 2-year mark. That's the kind of follow-up that makes a result worth taking seriously in the first place. Researchers hold a detail like the shared diet constant on purpose, too. If the water group and the wine group had eaten differently, you'd never know whether an improved number came from the glass or from the meal sitting next to it, and locking that variable in place across all 3 groups is what let the researchers credit the difference to what was actually in the glass. Published in the Annals of Internal Medicine in 2015, the headline result was this: markers of blood sugar control, fasting glucose, the reading you'd get first thing in the morning before food, and HbA1c, a 3-month average of your blood sugar, both moved in a better direction in the wine drinkers compared with the water group. Pour a nightly glass, the thinking goes, and your numbers improve over time. That sentence turned into a permanent talking point. It's worth pausing on why a trial built this way is worth listening to in the first place. Most of what circulates about wine and health comes from watching people who already drink wine and noticing their numbers look decent, which tells you almost nothing, because people who drink a nightly glass of wine with a Mediterranean-style dinner tend to differ from everyone else in a dozen other ways too: income, activity level, what else is on the plate. Randomly assigning people to water, white wine, or red wine, the way this trial did, is what isolates the wine itself as the cause, instead of just the company it keeps. That's rarer than it sounds, and it's exactly why this one trial ended up carrying so much weight. Most retellings quietly blur 2 different findings into one. Red wine, on its own, did do something real in this trial. It raised HDL, the cholesterol your body uses well, by about 2 points, and it nudged down a composite score of metabolic syndrome risk factors compared with water. That's a heart and metabolism result, and it is not the same thing as the blood sugar result, the fasting glucose and HbA1c improvement, the one everybody actually means when they say, wine helps blood sugar. That result never belonged to red wine alone, or to wine in general. It belonged to a specific slice of the room, and the researchers said so themselves, in the same paper. So who exactly is the wine group that improved? The half of the room it actually worked for. Here's the detail the top-line sentence leaves out entirely. The paper's own published result found that the glycemic improvement, both wines combined, showed up only in participants carrying a specific version of a gene called ADH1B, the gene that controls how fast your body clears alcohol from your blood. This wasn't a footnote added later. It was reported in the same 2015 result as the headline. Here's what that gene actually does, in plain terms. ADH1B makes the enzyme your liver uses for the very first step of breaking down alcohol. The slower version of that enzyme does the same job, just less efficiently, which means the alcohol you drank stays measurable in your blood for longer after the glass is empty. Carry that slower metabolizing version, and alcohol lingers in your system longer each evening, long enough to influence how your body handles glucose overnight. Carry the faster clearing version, and the alcohol is gone before it can do much of anything, and in this trial, that group's blood sugar markers barely moved at all on the same nightly glass. Roughly half of people carry the slower version, which means, on this study's own numbers, half the room drank the identical 5 ounces every night for 2 years and never got the benefit the headline promises. Nobody chooses which version of that gene they carry, and nobody watching a video like this one has it printed on a chart at home. Testing for it isn't part of a standard diabetes checkup. It takes a specific genetic panel most people have never ordered, and most doctors wouldn't reach for on a hunch about wine. It isn't a lifestyle factor you can adjust with effort, the way portion size or timing is. It's closer to eye color than diet, and the gap between the two groups in this trial was large enough that averaging them together, the way a headline does, hides the fact that roughly half the successful wine drinkers weren't succeeding at all. There's more worth knowing before anyone builds a nightly habit on this one trial. It wasn't blinded, meaning every participant and every researcher running the checkups knew exactly who was drinking wine and who was drinking water. There was no way to disguise a glass of red as a glass of water, so unlike a pill trial where nobody can tell their medication from a sugar pill, everyone here knew which group they were in the whole time, which leaves room for expectation alone to nudge a result. The group studied had already been managing diabetes well, and mostly weren't regular drinkers before the study began. This isn't a picture of a typical evening drinker with a harder-to-control history. A 2026 review in the journal Nutrients, weighing this trial against the rest of the wine and health literature, also flags that some of the funding behind this line of research comes from foundations that promote the Mediterranean diet itself, wine included. That doesn't make the finding false. It's exactly the kind of detail a fair account includes, instead of quietly leaving out. None of that means the trial is wrong. It means the trial is smaller and more conditional than the headline built from it, and it was only ever true for some of the people, now repeating it as a rule for everyone. What the resveratrol story leaves out. The ingredient usually credited for wine's reputation isn't the alcohol at all. It's a compound called resveratrol, concentrated in the skins of red grapes and carried into red wine because red wine ferments in contact with those skins far longer than white does. It's worth walking through on its own, because it's carrying nearly as much of the wine is healthy story as the trial above, and it deserves the same honest treatment. A 2023 analysis in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, pooling 11 separate clinical trials on resveratrol, found it did lower fasting glucose and improve insulin resistance in people who already had diabetes. Insulin resistance simply means your body needs more and more insulin to do the same job of moving sugar out of your blood, the way a narrowed pipe needs more pressure behind the water to push the same amount through. In people without diabetes, the same compound, at the same doses, made no real difference to that narrowing at all. So even on its best reading, resveratrol is not a general blood sugar booster for everyone watching this. It's a possible help specifically for a body already managing diabetes, and a modest one at that, not a dramatic one. And here's the part that matters most if you're picturing your wine glass as the delivery method. The doses that produced those results came from concentrated supplements, not from drinking. To get anywhere near that amount from wine alone, you wouldn't be having a glass with dinner. You'd be drinking bottles of it, every day, at a volume nobody responsible is recommending, and well past the point where the alcohol itself starts working against your blood sugar faster than the resveratrol could ever help it. The wine gives you a trace of resveratrol. The dose that helped in trials gives you a bottle count nobody is suggesting you drink. If you've seen resveratrol sold on its own, as a capsule, and wondered whether that's the smarter route than the glass, the honest answer is, possibly, for the specific benefit measured in people who already have diabetes, and without the alcohol attached at all. Worth a separate conversation with your doctor, sure, but a different one from tonight's glass of wine, and whether it's doing this work for you. The question, the halo never asks. It's 2 in the morning. Dinner and its glass of wine were hours ago, finished before the news came on, and the evening felt completely uneventful. The body doesn't know it's supposed to be resting easy, just because nothing seemed to happen. While you sleep, breaking down alcohol produces a chemical byproduct that shifts the balance of certain molecules inside your liver cells, and that shift specifically interferes with your liver's ability to manufacture new glucose from scratch. The exact process it normally leans on overnight to keep your blood sugar from drifting too low while you're not eating. Your liver hasn't forgotten the job. The job has gotten chemically harder to do for as long as there's alcohol left in the system to clear. This isn't a theory sitting in a lab textbook. In one controlled study, 10 adults with type 2 diabetes, average age 68, all taking a medication called a sulfonylurea, a pill that pushes the pancreas to release insulin whether or not food is coming, were given an amount of alcohol equal to 1 or 2 drinks partway through a supervised 24-hour fast. Their blood sugar bottomed out lower and dropped faster than it did on the identical fast without any alcohol in the system, roughly 79 on a home meter with alcohol on board against roughly 90 without it, and the size of that drop was close to a third bigger. That was published in Diabetes Care in 1999. The pattern it described has held up since. Alcohol can lower blood sugar for 8 to 24 hours afterward. That's well past any point where someone would still call it having a drink with dinner. For most people, that's a fact worth simply knowing. For anyone taking insulin or a sulfonylurea specifically, it's a bigger one, because those are exactly the medications already pushing glucose down on their own, and a low blood sugar overnight can feel, to a half-asleep body, like nothing more than restlessness or a bad night's sleep. Nobody wakes up at 3 a.m. and thinks, this is a medical event. Most people just don't sleep well and never learn why. And for older adults on these medications specifically, that quiet miss is exactly what the guidelines are trying to prevent. And here's the mirror image mistake worth heading off before it forms. If one glass helped the lucky half of that trial's room, it's tempting to assume more must help more. An early-stage look at 49 midlife adults, presented at the American Physiological Society's 2024 meeting, found the opposite. Heavy drinkers ran higher fasting glucose than non-heavy drinkers, not lower, even though their liver and kidney function looked similar on paper. It's a small, early finding, not a settled one, but it points the same direction every larger study of heavy drinking does. Whatever benefit shows up at 1 glass for the genetically lucky half doesn't scale upward, it reverses. The genes are a coin flip, the liver isn't. Every person pouring that glass tonight is subject to this second mechanism, whether or not they won the genetic coin flip that decided the first one. A low blood sugar overnight doesn't come with a warning label, which is exactly why it's so easy to miss on your own. You won't necessarily feel shaky or sweaty the way a daytime low might announce itself, because you're asleep through the part where your body would normally be signaling something's wrong. The only way to know is to look, not to guess, from how rested you feel in the morning. If you're on insulin or a sulfonylurea, checking your blood sugar before bed on a night you've had wine, and again if you happen to wake up, is a 5-second habit that catches what you can't feel happening. Bring your specific medication and timing to your doctor or pharmacist as a real question, not a video telling you what to do with your prescription. I'm not telling you to change anything here. I'm telling you which words to bring into that appointment. Your one glass done on purpose. So if you're having the glass anyway, and plenty of seniors watching this are, here's how to make it the version that actually respects your number, not the version built on a headline. Start with what's in the glass. A standard pour is 5 ounces, roughly the halfway mark on a normal wine glass, not filled to the rim. A dry red or white wine in that pour carries about 4 grams of carbohydrate and around 120 to 125 calories. A sweet dessert wine, in a much smaller pour, closer to 3.5 ounces, can carry about 14 grams, more than 3 times the sugar packed into less than 3/4 of the liquid. Dry over sweet isn't a taste preference in this conversation. It's the one number in this entire video you can act on with zero ambiguity, tonight, at the store or at the table. Government dietary guidance defines moderate as up to 1 drink a day for women and up to 2 for men, a standard drink being that same 5-ounce pour. That guidance is clear about one more thing too. It's a ceiling for people already choosing to drink, never an invitation to start. Second, never let the glass stand alone on an empty stomach. Pour it with the meal itself, not after the plates are cleared and everyone's already left the table. Food slows how fast the alcohol reaches your bloodstream and gives your liver something besides the wine to be working on at the same moment. Picture an ordinary Tuesday. Dinner's on the table, chicken, rice, some green beans, and the bottle comes out with it, not after the plates are already in the sink. You pour to the halfway line on the glass, a dry white or a dry red, either one. The whole habit, repeated on the nights you'd have had the glass anyway. Nothing about it requires giving up the ritual, the company, or the taste you enjoy. Third, think of it as wine nights, not every night. The moderate ceiling above is a daily allowance on paper, but the overnight mechanism we just walked through doesn't reset itself just because you stayed inside that ceiling. A glass on Tuesday and Saturday, with dinner, in front of the people you like having it with, does the same thing for the evening itself as a glass every single night, without asking your liver to clear alcohol on top of everything else it's already managing 7 nights out of 7. One more distinction worth having, because not every diabetes medication carries the same risk here. This overnight mechanism is specifically about insulin and sulfonylureas, the medications that push glucose down on their own, regardless of what you eat or drink. If metformin is the only medication you're on, this particular overnight risk is much smaller, since metformin doesn't force insulin release the way a sulfonylurea does. Pay attention anyway, since this is the difference between a risk tied to your specific prescription and a blanket rule applied to every diabetes medication as if they were interchangeable, which they aren't. Here's your one thing tonight. If tonight happens to be one of your wine nights, pour it with dinner. Choose the dry option if you have a choice on the shelf, and stop at 1, since the overnight risk we just walked through doesn't stay flat, it climbs with the amount in your system. If you're on insulin or a sulfonylurea, that short conversation with your doctor about your own numbers matters more than anything else in this video, and it costs you nothing but the few sentences it takes to ask. So which is it for you tonight? The coin flip written into your genes, or the overnight risk that doesn't care about genes at all? Answer honestly in the comments. Seeing how that splits across everyone watching would be genuinely useful. If you want tonight's numbers written out on one page together, the exact serving sizes and the doctor conversation questions side by side, that's the free action guide, linked below and in the pinned comment. Next time, we'll put apple cider vinegar's actual blood sugar claims under this same kind of honest look. the internet's other favorite kitchen cabinet fix.